My father told me to delete his phone number. That was 2 weeks before Thanksgiving, and my crime was refusing to swap houses with my sister for a year. She has 3 kids, my mother said, her voice carrying that familiar tone, like that was the only explanation anyone could ever need. It's only fair. When I said no, my father's response was immediate. Fine. Don't come for Thanksgiving. In fact, lose our number. What he didn't know, what none of them knew, was that 5 years earlier, when they were about to lose the house he claimed he built with his own 2 hands, I was the one who bought it at a foreclosure auction. I've been letting them live there for $1 a year, and I still have the deed. I'm Bianca Hartwell, 34 years old, and this is the story of how I stopped protecting people who refused to see me. If you're watching this, please subscribe and let me know where you are watching from. To understand what happened at Thanksgiving, you need to understand where I stood in my family's hierarchy. Or rather, where I didn't stand. I'm a real estate investment analyst at Meridian Capital Partners in Hartford. My salary is $127,000 a year. I own the condo I live in, a sleek one-bedroom in West Hartford that my family believes I rent because I've never corrected them. They also don't know about the 3 other properties I own through my LLC, or the investment portfolio I've been building since I was 26. But to my parents, I'm still the unmarried daughter with the little office job. The comparisons with Jennifer started before I could walk. She's 4 years older, married to Derek, a regional sales rep, and mother to 3 kids, Madison, 8, Tyler, 6, and little Emma, 3. In my family's math, that makes her infinitely more valuable than me. I remember my 30th birthday. I just closed a $2.3 million deal at work, my biggest yet. I waited all day for a call from my parents. Nothing. A week later, my mother finally remembered. Oh, we meant to call, honey, but we were busy taking Madison to the orthodontist. You understand? I understood perfectly. Every family gathering, I was the one who stayed late to clean the dishes. Every holiday, I contributed $500 to the family fund, while Jennifer contributed excuses about diapers and school supplies. No one ever said thank you. No one even noticed. The worst part? I let it happen. Year after year, I showed up, smiled, helped, and swallowed every comparison like it was medicine I deserved. Then came the phone call that changed everything. November 14th, 2024. A Thursday evening. I was reviewing a property assessment when my phone lit up with my mother's name and a heart emoji I'd added years ago, back when I still believed the symbol meant something. Bianca, honey, we need to talk about Thanksgiving. I set down my pen. Sure, Mom, what's up? Well, it's about Jennifer. You know how cramped their house is with 3 kids now. Derek's been working extra shifts, and they really need more space. She paused, and I heard the particular intake of breath that always preceded an unreasonable request. We think you should swap houses with her, just for a year. I blinked at the wall of my office. Swap houses? Your condo for her place. She'd move into your apartment. It's so convenient to everything, and you'd stay at their house in Branford. It's bigger, technically, and you're alone anyway, so you don't need— Mom. I kept my voice level. My condo is 15 minutes from my office. Jennifer's house is over an hour away. So you'd have a longer commute. People do it all the time. I heard my father's voice in the background, then the click of speakerphone. Bianca. His voice was flat. Stop being difficult. Your sister has 3 children. You have nobody. It's only fair that you help her out. Something in my chest tightened. That old familiar knot. But for once, I didn't immediately start calculating how to make everyone happy. No, I said. I can't do that. My home is my home. The silence lasted exactly 4 seconds. I counted. Excuse me? My father's voice dropped to that register I'd spent my childhood avoiding. Did you just say no to your own family? I said I can't swap houses. That's not a reasonable— Unbelievable. He cut me off. We raised you and this is what we get? Selfishness? I gripped the phone tighter, but before I could respond, the call took a turn I never expected. The silence on the line stretched like a held breath. Then my father spoke, and his words landed like stones. Fine. Don't come for Thanksgiving. His voice was cold, measured, the tone he used when he'd made up his mind and considered the matter closed. In fact, Bianca, lose our number. I didn't raise a daughter to be this selfish. I heard my mother's faint protest in the background. Richard, maybe we should— No, Diane. She made her choice. The line went dead. I sat there for 10 minutes, phone still pressed to my ear, listening to nothing. My hand was shaking, though I didn't realize it until I finally set the device down and watched my fingers tremble against the desk. This wasn't the first time I'd been threatened with exile. When I chose to attend UConn instead of the local community college Jennifer had gone to, my father hadn't spoken to me for 3 weeks. When I moved to Hartford instead of staying in Westbrook, my mother called it abandoning the family. But this was different. Being told to lose their number, as if I were a stranger, a telemarketer, someone who had never mattered. That was new. That was final. I stared at my reflection in the dark window. 34 years old, successful career, financial independence, and my father had just told me I didn't exist anymore. My eyes drifted to the stack of folders on my desk, and one caught my attention. A manila envelope with a small logo in the corner. Hartwell Properties, LLC. My company, my assets, including the 4-bedroom colonial at 847 Maple Grove Lane, where my parents had been living for the past 5 years. The house they believed was still theirs. A decision began to form, one I'd been avoiding for half a decade. To understand what I'm about to tell you, we need to go back 5 years. March 2019. I was 29, 6 months into my first promotion at Meridian Capital. I was still learning to trust my own judgment, still surprised every morning that I had an office with a door that closed. Then my Aunt Evelyn called. Evelyn Marsh was my father's younger sister, the family's quiet success story. She'd spent 30 years as a CPA, married a good man named Howard, and built a comfortable life in New Haven. She was also the only relative who'd ever told me, unprompted, that I was talented. Bianca, we need to talk, in person. Can you come to New Haven this weekend? I found her in her kitchen that Saturday, financial documents spread across the table like evidence at a trial. Her face was drawn, worried in a way I'd never seen before. Your parents are about to lose the house. The words didn't make sense at first. The house on Maple Grove Lane was the center of my father's identity. He'd told the story 1,000 times, how he'd poured the foundation himself, how he'd spent weekends framing the walls, how every nail in that house knew his name. That's impossible, I said. Dad would never. Your father lost his job in 2017. He didn't tell anyone except your mother. Evelyn slid a document across the table. They've missed 18 months of mortgage payments. The bank sent a foreclosure notice last month. I stared at the First National Bank of Connecticut letterhead. The numbers blurred. $312,000 outstanding. Auction scheduled for March 15th. Why didn't they ask for help? Evelyn's smile was sad. You know your father. His pride would rather let him drown than admit he's in the water. What about Jennifer? Does she know? No one knows. Richard made Diane promise. She reached across the table and took my hand. But I know you, Bianca. I know you have savings, and I know you're the only one in this family who could actually do something. I looked at the foreclosure notice again, March 15th, 10 days away. They'd never accept help from me, I said. Dad would rather lose the house than admit I saved him. Evelyn nodded slowly. Which is why they don't need to know. And that's when the plan began to take shape. 2 days later, I sat across from Marcus Coleman in his Hartford law office, signing papers that would change everything. Marcus was 41, a real estate attorney I'd worked with on 3 investment deals. He had a reputation for discretion and a poker face that could outlast a glacier. Let me make sure I understand, he said, reviewing my instructions. You want to purchase the property at auction, hold it through an LLC, and then lease it back to your parents without them knowing you're the owner? Yes. At $1 per year. Correct. He set down his pen. Bianca, I've been doing this for 15 years. This is the most unusual arrangement I've ever structured. Can it be done legally? Yes, Hartwell Properties LLC will be the sole owner. You'll be listed as the sole member, but LLCs don't require public disclosure of membership in Connecticut. Your parents will receive paperwork from the LLC, not from you. He paused. May I ask why? I thought about my father, about the man who'd spent my childhood reminding me that Jennifer was the responsible one, the capable one. The man who couldn't admit he needed help from anyone, least of all his disappointing younger daughter. Because if my father knew I saved him, he'd rather be homeless than grateful. Marcus nodded slowly. The lease will include standard terms. I'm adding a clause, Section 7.3, that allows you to terminate with 60 days' notice if there's a serious breach of good faith. He slid the paper across. Just in case you ever need leverage. I signed everywhere he indicated. On March 15, 2019, I won the foreclosure auction with a bid of $287,000. Every dollar I'd saved since graduating college, plus a loan against my 401k. My parents never knew. They believed they'd negotiated a second chance with the bank. And for 5 years, that's exactly what I let them believe. Back to November 2024. 2 days after my father told me to lose his number, I sat in my Hartford office at 7 p.m., staring at a framed photo on my desk. It was from Thanksgiving 3 years ago. The whole family arranged in front of the house, my parents in the center, Jennifer and her kids on one side, me squeezed into the corner like an afterthought. My phone showed 17 unread messages. 3 were from Jennifer. I can't believe you said no. Do you know how much stress you're causing Mom and Dad? And, you've always been selfish, but this is a new low. And, just think about someone other than yourself for once. One was from my mother. Bianca, please reconsider. Don't let something small tear this family apart. You know Jennifer needs this. Nothing from my father, of course. One missed call from a number I recognized immediately. Aunt Evelyn. I called her back. Bianca. Her voice was warm but serious. I heard what happened. Your mother called me, spinning it as you being difficult. Of course she did. I need to tell you something. I was at your parents' house last week, and I saw something in the safe. She paused. Your mother doesn't understand what she's looking at, but I do. Bianca, she's seen the deed. My stomach dropped. What do you mean, seen it? She found the ownership papers. She asked me what Hartwell Properties LLC meant. I didn't tell her anything, but she's confused. She thinks the bank owns the house now. I closed my eyes. 5 years of careful silence, and now, Chao oi, Evelyn said softly, switching to Vietnamese the way she sometimes did when she was being tender. I think it's time. Time for what? Time for you to stop protecting people who refuse to see you. Tell me exactly what happened, I said, leaning back in my office chair. Evelyn's voice was steady, the way it always was when she was laying out facts. 30 years as a CPA had trained her well. I visited last Tuesday. Your father fell asleep after lunch. His back pain has been worse lately. So I was sitting with Diane in the living room. She started complaining about how expensive everything is, how they can barely make ends meet. I waited. Then she said something strange. She said, "At least we don't have to pay rent, since the house belongs to some company now anyway." I asked her what she meant, and she got flustered, said your father had told her not to discuss it. But she did anyway. You know your mother. She went to the safe in the study, your father's safe, and pulled out a document, a deed of trust, Hartwell Properties LLC. She asked me if I knew what it meant. I held my breath. What did you tell her? I told her that LLCs are common for property management and that I'd need to see more paperwork to explain further. She accepted that. She doesn't understand what she's looking at, Bianca. But the deed is there. Deed number 2019 CT47832. Your name isn't visible, but the LLC is. The document I'd hoped would stay buried forever was now sitting in my father's safe, a ticking clock neither of my parents could read. Does my father know she showed you? No. And I didn't tell him. Evelyn paused. But Bianca, listen to me. You've kept this secret for 5 years. You did it to protect their pride. But they just told you to delete their number because you wouldn't give your sister a house that isn't even yours to give. Silence. The way I see it, she continued, you have 2 choices. Keep protecting them and lose yourself, or tell the truth and see who they really are. I stared at the Hartwell Properties folder on my desk. I think I already know who they are. Then maybe it's time they knew who you are. 10 days before Thanksgiving. The silence from my parents was absolute. No calls, no texts, no olive branches. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the one trying to fix things, but Jennifer made sure I knew exactly where I stood. She posted a photo on Facebook. The dining room table at my parents' house covered in autumn leaves and miniature pumpkins. Getting ready for our biggest Thanksgiving ever. Family is everything. 23 comments, 47 likes. I scrolled through every one. Cousin Rachel. Can't wait to see everyone. Aunt Martha. The decorations look beautiful. Uncle Tom. Save me the drumstick. I wasn't tagged, I wasn't mentioned. In the comments when someone asked, is Bianca coming this year? My mother had replied, she's busy with work. You know how she is. The lie slid in so smoothly that no one questioned it. Over the next week, 4 relatives reached out to me privately. Cousin Sarah. Hey, is everything okay? Mom said you might not be at Thanksgiving. Aunt Martha. Bianca dear, hope you can make it. Would love to catch up. I didn't respond to any of them. What would I say? That my father had disowned me over a house swap? That my family had written me out of their holiday without a second thought? At night, after work, I'd open the Hartwell Properties file and read through the documents again. The deed, the foreclosure auction confirmation, the lease agreement with my signature, and there, in an old email exchange with Marcus, a sentence I'd almost forgotten. The lease can be terminated early. You retain full legal ownership and all associated rights. I'd signed that clause 5 years ago as a safety net. I never thought I'd need it. Now I wasn't so sure. 1 week before Thanksgiving. Monday morning, 8:47 a.m. I was at my desk, coffee growing cold, when an email notification appeared. Jennifer Hartwell Morrison had forwarded me a message from our mother. Subject line, Thanksgiving seating. The original email, from Diane to Jennifer. Don't worry about setting a place for Bianca. She's made her choice. We'll have exactly 24 seats, perfect for everyone who actually wants to be here. Jennifer's edition, forwarded directly to me. Just so you know what you're missing, hope it was worth it. I read it 3 times. 24 seats. I'd been erased from the count. Not just uninvited. I'd been architecturally removed, like a wall no one needed anymore. Something shifted in my chest. Not the familiar ache of rejection, but something colder, clearer. I picked up my phone and called Marcus Coleman. Bianca? His voice was professionally neutral. Everything okay with the properties? I need you to prepare some documents for me. The full ownership file for 847 Maple Grove Lane, certified copies of the deed, the original foreclosure auction confirmation, and the current lease agreement. A pause. All of them? All of them. And Marcus, I'm going to need them by Wednesday. May I ask what's happening? I looked at the email still glowing on my screen. 24 seats. I'm going home for Thanksgiving. The silence on his end lasted 3 full seconds. You understand, he said carefully, that if you present these documents, there's no going back. Your parents will know everything. I understand. And you're certain this is what you want? I thought about 5 years of silence, 5 years of $1 rent and holiday contributions, and cleaning up after everyone and being compared to my sister, and being told I was selfish for wanting to keep my own home. I'm certain, I said. They told me to lose their number. I think I'll lose their house keys instead. I booked a flight to Connecticut that afternoon. If you've made it this far, I want to ask you something. Have you ever had to choose between keeping the peace in your family and keeping your self-respect? I'd love to hear your story. Drop a comment below. I read every single one. And if you want to know what happened when I walked into that Thanksgiving dinner, subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss the rest. Trust me, you're going to want to see their faces. Marcus Coleman's office was on the 7th floor of a glass building in downtown Hartford, the kind of place where everything was polished and nothing was accidental. I arrived Tuesday afternoon, 3 days before Thanksgiving. He was waiting with a navy blue folder thick with documents. Everything's here, he said, spreading the contents across his desk. Certified copy of Deed of Trust number 2019 CT 47832, naming Hartwell Properties LLC as sole owner. You're listed as the sole member. He tapped the next document. Foreclosure auction confirmation from First National Bank of Connecticut, dated March 15, 2019. Winning bid, $287,000, paid in full. I studied the bank's letterhead, the official stamps, the proof of a transaction that had saved my parents and cost me everything I'd worked for. And this, Marcus continued, is the lease agreement. 5-year term, automatic renewal, $1 per year. He paused on a highlighted section. Section 7.3, which we discussed at signing, the termination clause. I read the language again. Owner may terminate this agreement with 60 days written notice upon any serious breach of conduct or good faith by the tenant. Legally, Marcus said, you have every right to be there. You have every right to present this information. And you have every right to modify or terminate the lease at any time. I'm not planning to evict them. He nodded slowly. Then what are you planning? I gathered the documents and slid them into the folder. They think the house is theirs. They think I'm the family disappointment. They think they can tell me to disappear because I won't trade my home for my sister's convenience. I stood up. I'm going to show them who actually holds the deed. Marcus handed me one more document, a blank termination notice. Just in case, he said. I took it without signing. Wednesday evening, I drove from Hartford to New Haven. Evelyn's house was a modest Cape Cod on a quiet street lined with bare maple trees. She'd lived there for 32 years, first with Uncle Howard, and now alone since his passing in 2021. The porch light was already on when I pulled into the driveway. You came, she said, pulling me into a hug at the door. You knew I would. We sat in her living room, the same room where she'd first shown me my father's foreclosure notice 5 years ago. The tea she made was too strong, exactly the way she'd always made it. I'll be there tomorrow, Evelyn said. Richard doesn't know I'm coming. I didn't RSVP. He won't be happy to see you. He hasn't been happy to see me since 1987, when Howard's business made more money than his. She shrugged, the gesture carrying decades of family history. Your father has always measured himself against everyone else. It's exhausting, but it's who he is. I wrapped my hands around the warm mug. I've spent my whole life trying not to disappoint him, and somehow, I always failed. Evelyn reached across and took my hand. You didn't fail, Bianca. You were never going to succeed because the game was rigged. Jennifer could do no wrong. You could do no right. That was decided before you could walk. So why did you help me save them? Because helping them was never about them. It was about who you wanted to be. She squeezed my fingers. And tomorrow, it's about who you are now. We ate dinner together. Roasted chicken, green beans, the comfort food of my childhood visits. For the first time in weeks, my shoulders didn't feel like they were carrying stones. Tomorrow, everything would change. Thanksgiving Eve. I checked into a hotel 15 minutes from Maple Grove Lane. The room was generic, beige walls, stiff white sheets, a window overlooking the parking lot. I'd stayed in 100 rooms like it during work trips, but this one felt different. This one was the waiting room before the verdict. My phone sat silent on the nightstand. 0 messages from my parents, 0 from Jennifer. It was as if I'd already vanished, but other notifications had piled up. Cousin Sarah. Heading to Westbrook tomorrow, will you be there? Aunt Martha. Bianca, dear, I heard you might not make it. Everything okay? I didn't respond to any of them. Not yet. What could I say that wouldn't require explaining everything? I unpacked the Navy folder and spread the documents across the bed. The deed, the auction confirmation, the lease, the blank termination notice I still hadn't signed. Paper evidence of 5 years of silent sacrifice. I picked up the deed and traced my finger over the LLC name, Hartwell Properties. I'd chosen the name deliberately, a quiet assertion that I, too, was a Hartwell. That I, too, belonged to this family. They'd never seen it that way. I walked to the bathroom mirror and studied my reflection. The woman staring back at me wasn't the people-pleaser who'd spent a decade apologizing for existing. She wasn't the little sister who'd accepted every comparison as gospel. She was someone new, or maybe someone who'd been there all along, waiting for permission to emerge. They don't know Evelyn is coming, I said aloud. That's surprise number 1. I gathered the documents and placed them carefully in my bag. Tomorrow, I would be surprise number 2. November 28th, 2024. Thanksgiving Day. I know what was happening at 847 Maple Grove Lane that morning, because I've attended enough of these gatherings to recite the script by heart. 5:00 a.m. My mother, Diane, would have risen in the dark to start the turkey. The 24-pound bird she'd ordered from Patterson's butcher shop, the same size, every year since 1999. 7:00 a.m. My father, Richard, would have taken his position at the head of the dining room table, nursing black coffee and surveying his domain. The house he built with his own hands, the family he commanded, the holiday he controlled. 10:00 a.m. Jennifer and Derek would have arrived with the children, Madison already complaining about her dress, Tyler asking when they could eat, little Emma clutching her stuffed rabbit. Jennifer would have swept into the kitchen and started issuing orders to our mother. No, the cranberries go in the blue bowl, because Jennifer had inherited our father's need to control without inheriting his actual authority. By noon, the first guests would have trickled in. Uncle Tom and his wife Patricia, Aunt Martha, widowed now, bringing her famous sweet potato casserole. Cousins I saw once a year, the Hendersons from next door, who'd known my parents for 30 years. 23 people by my count, not including my parents. 24 chairs arranged around the extended dining table, the card table for the kids, the folding chairs borrowed from the church. No chair for me. I'd already been erased from the seating chart. At exactly 1:45 p.m., while I was still sitting in my hotel room reviewing my documents one final time, Evelyn Marsh rang the doorbell at 847 Maple Grove Lane. She hadn't RSVP'd, she hadn't called ahead, and from what she told me later, the look on my mother's face when she opened the door was worth the 45-minute drive. Evelyn? Diane's voice carried 15 years of tension. We didn't know you were coming. Thanksgiving is for family, Evelyn said, stepping inside. I'm still family, aren't I? I know this part of the story secondhand, from Evelyn's account later that evening. She walked into my parents' house at exactly 1:47 p.m., wearing a charcoal cashmere coat that had cost more than my father made in a week during his working years. It wasn't an accident. Evelyn understood performance. Richard rose from his chair the moment he saw her, his face shifting through 3 expressions in rapid succession: surprise, irritation, and finally a forced smile for the benefit of the relatives already gathered in the living room. Evelyn, his voice was controlled, you should have told us you were coming. I wasn't sure until this morning, she lied smoothly. But I couldn't miss a family Thanksgiving. So many people here, it reminds me of the old days. The reference was deliberate. The old days meant before Howard's business took off, before Evelyn became the quiet success of the family, before Richard's resentment calcified into something that never quite qualified as hatred, but never approached warmth either. She made her way through the crowd, greeting relatives with genuine affection. Uncle Tom hugged her. Aunt Martha kissed her cheek. The children came to show her their new toys, because Evelyn had always been the aunt who remembered birthdays. Jennifer watched from the kitchen doorway, eyes narrowed. "Where's Bianca?" she asked, the question carrying an edge. Evelyn smiled. "I'm sure she'll be here when she's ready." Jennifer's expression flickered, confusion, suspicion, and something that might have been worry. "She's not coming. Dad told her not to." Evelyn settled into a chair near the window, accepting a glass of sparkling cider from a cousin. "I wouldn't be so certain, Jennifer. Your sister has a way of surprising people." She glanced toward the empty chair near the corner of the table, the one extra spot no one had bothered to remove, and smiled to herself. 2:05 p.m. I stood on the front porch of 847 Maple Grove Lane. The house looked the same as it had my entire life: the brick facade, the black shutters, the brass knocker my father had installed himself in 1996. Through the window, I could see the warm glow of the gathering inside, the shadows of 23 people moving, laughing, living. I was holding a navy blue bag containing every document that would change their understanding of the past 5 years. The doorbell chime echoed through the house. My mother opened the door. For a moment, she simply stared, her expression frozen in a kind of disbelief that aged her 10 years in front of me. "Bianca?" "Hi, Mom. I came home for Thanksgiving." Behind her, the murmur of conversation went silent. I could feel the collective attention of the room shifting toward the entrance like a wave gathering force. I stepped inside and closed the door behind me. 23 pairs of eyes tracked my movement. I was wearing a camel coat over a burgundy sweater dress. Professional, polished, nothing like the simple cardigans and jeans I'd always worn to these events before. I'd thought carefully about this moment for 3 days. I wanted to look like someone who deserved to be taken seriously. My father appeared from the living room, his face darkening the moment he saw me. "What are you doing here?" His voice was low, dangerous. "I told you not to come." "You told me to lose your number," I replied, my voice steady. "But you never told me to lose my keys." "Your keys? This is my house. I'll tell you when you're welcome and when you're not." Jennifer materialized behind him, flanked by Derek. "Dad's right, Bianca. You can't just show up after—" I looked past them to the dining room, where Evelyn sat near the window, watching with an expression of quiet confidence. Then I looked at my father. "You built this house with your own hands," I said. "That's the story, right?" His jaw tightened. "Don't mock me." "I'm not mocking you. I'm asking a question." I shifted the bag on my shoulder. "Because I need you to understand. The story you've been telling isn't true." My father's face went through a series of expressions like a slot machine that couldn't quite land on a winner. "What are you talking about?" he said finally. "Of course it's true. I built this house in 1994. Every beam, every foundation, every—" "You built the house," I interrupted gently. "But you don't own it anymore." The room was so quiet I could hear the click of the grandfather clock in the hallway. Jennifer laughed, a sharp, uncomfortable sound. "Now you're just embarrassing yourself. What, you're going to lie to everyone here because you're mad at us?" Uncle Tom shifted in his seat. "Richard, what's she talking about?" My father straightened, his shoulders squaring the way they always did when his pride was at stake. "She's talking nonsense. I don't know what's gotten into her, but this is exactly why I said she shouldn't come. She's always been jealous of Jennifer, always trying to start drama." "I'm not starting drama," I said. "I'm ending it." I opened my bag and withdrew the navy folder. The rustle of paper seemed unnaturally loud in the silence. "In 2019, I continued, this house went into foreclosure. The mortgage hadn't been paid in 18 months. First National Bank of Connecticut scheduled an auction." My mother made a small, strangled sound. That's, that's not, she started. Private family business, my father cut in, his voice hard. And none of it is true. We work things out with the bank. That's all anyone needs to know. I looked at him, really looked at him, the way I hadn't allowed myself to in years. Dad, I said quietly, you didn't work anything out with the bank. You lost the auction. I set the folder on the dining table, right between the cranberry sauce and the basket of dinner rolls. I won it. Nobody moved. The 23 people gathered in that house, aunts, uncles, cousins, neighbors who'd known my family for decades, all stared at the navy folder on the table like it might explode. You're lying, Jennifer said, but her voice had lost its edge. That's impossible. It's not impossible. I opened the folder and removed the first document. This is the deed of trust for 847 Maple Grove Lane, recorded with Hartford County, number 2019 CT 47832. The owner is Hartwell Properties, LLC. My father grabbed for the paper, but I pulled it back. And this, I continued, withdrawing a second document, is the email confirmation from First National Bank of Connecticut, dated March 15, 2019. It confirms that Hartwell Properties, LLC won the foreclosure auction with a bid of $287,000. My mother had started crying, soft, bewildered tears that streaked her makeup. I don't understand, she whispered. The bank said we could stay. They said we had a second chance. There was no second chance from the bank, Mom. I kept my voice gentle, even as my heart pounded. There was only me. I bought the house. I set up the LLC so you wouldn't know it was me, and I let you stay for 5 years at $1 per year. Silence. Evelyn rose from her chair and walked to my side. She's telling the truth, my aunt said, her voice carrying the authority of 30 years in financial accounting. I helped her complete the transaction. I've seen all the original documents. Bianca saved this house when your pride wouldn't let you ask for help. Richard's face had gone from red to gray. He looked at the papers in my hands, then at his sister, then at me. You, he started. But for once, he had no words. I could see the memory surfacing behind my father's eyes. The spring of 2019, when the bank letters had stopped coming, when he'd suddenly announced that everything was worked out, and refused to discuss it further. Let me tell you what really happened, I said, my voice calm but carrying. March 15th, 2019. The foreclosure auction was held in a conference room at the Hartford County Administrative Building. Gray walls, fluorescent lights, 7 bidders, and a court officer reading the terms. I was the youngest person in the room by 20 years. I'd worn my best suit, the one I'd bought for my first job interview at Meridian Capital. My hands were shaking, but I kept them clasped together so no one would notice. The opening bid was $180,000, I continued, looking at my father. There were 3 other serious bidders: a real estate investor from New Haven, a house flipping company, and me. The bidding had gone quickly. $200,000, $220,000, $250,000. Each time I raised my paddle, I felt another year of savings disappear. When it hit $280,000, the investor dropped out. The flipping company bid $285,000. I paused. I bid $287,000, everything I had. The court officer had looked at me like I was crazy, a 29-year-old in a 2-new suit bidding her entire net worth on a house in Westbrook. Sold to bidder number 23, Hartwell Properties, LLC. Back in the dining room, I placed the bank's confirmation email on the table. The header was unmistakable. First National Bank of Connecticut. The subject line, Foreclosure Auction Confirmation. Property, 847 Maple Grove Lane. I bought this house to save you, I said. I set up the LLC so you could keep your pride. I charged you $1 a year so you'd never have to thank me, never even have to know. Jennifer looked like she'd been slapped. Uncle Tom had picked up the email and was reading it carefully, his lawyer's eyes scanning every line. This is real, he said quietly. Richard, this is real. My father still hadn't spoken. The silence in that dining room lasted exactly 11 seconds. I counted every one. Then the narrative my father had built over 25 years began to collapse. Uncle Tom set down the email confirmation and picked up the deed, examining the stamps and signatures with the trained eye of someone who'd practiced law for 3 decades before retiring. "This is legitimate," he said, looking up at Richard. "The property is owned by Hartwell Properties, LLC. It's been owned by them since March 2019. He turned to me. "And you're the sole member of the LLC?" "Yes." Aunt Martha pressed her hand to her mouth. "Richard, you told us you worked things out with the bank. You told everyone." "I thought we had," my mother whispered. "Richard said it was handled. He said we didn't need to worry anymore." My father was gripping the edge of his chair like it was the only thing keeping him from drowning. There must be some mistake." His eyes darted around the room, looking for an ally, finding none. "Evelyn, you put her up to this. You've always wanted to humiliate me." "I didn't put her up to anything," Evelyn said calmly. "I told her about the foreclosure because I thought she deserved to know. What she did with that information was her choice." Cousin Sarah, who'd been standing near the kitchen, spoke up. "Wait, so Bianca's been paying for this house the whole time? And you didn't know?" "Nobody knew," I said. That was the point. Jennifer's voice cut through the murmurs. "Then why tell us now? Why humiliate everyone like this?" I turned to look at my sister, really look at her. "Because 2 weeks ago, Dad told me to lose his number, because I wouldn't give you a house that was never mine to give." I held her gaze. And I realized, I've been protecting people who don't even see me. Evelyn stepped forward, her CPA voice cutting through the room's confusion with the precision of a scalpel. "Let me make something absolutely clear," she said. "I've seen every document related to this transaction. I witnessed the formation of the LLC. I was present when Bianca signed the paperwork at Marcus Coleman's office. He's a real estate attorney in Hartford if anyone wants to verify." She looked directly at her brother. "Richard, in March 2019, you were $312,000 in debt. You hadn't made a mortgage payment in 18 months. The bank had sent 3 final notices, and you ignored all of them." She let that land. "Bianca used $287,000, every dollar she'd saved in 7 years of working, to buy this house at auction. She could have let it go to strangers. She could have let you lose everything. Instead, she saved you." My mother was sobbing now, her shoulders shaking. "And in return," Evelyn continued, her voice harder, "she got to hear you call her selfish. She got excluded from family photos. She got compared to Jennifer at every opportunity. And 2 weeks ago, you told her to delete your number because she wouldn't hand over her own home to accommodate your favorite daughter." The word hung in the air. Favorite. Jennifer flinched. "That's not—" she started. "Yes, it is," Evelyn said. "And everyone in this room knows it. The only difference is that today, you can't pretend otherwise." Richard finally looked up. His face had aged 10 years in the last 10 minutes. "I didn't know," he said. His voice cracked. "I didn't know it was her." "Would it have mattered?" I asked quietly. He didn't answer. But in that moment, watching my father struggle to find words that wouldn't come, I realized I already knew the answer. It shouldn't have taken ownership papers to make me visible. My father sat in the chair at the head of the table, the position he'd held for 25 years of family gatherings. But he no longer looked like the patriarch of anything. The other guests had begun talking among themselves in hushed tones, the way people do at funerals when they're not sure what to say to the bereaved. Some of them kept glancing at the documents still spread across the table. Others avoided looking at anyone at all. Richard stared at his hands. "I thought," he started, "I thought the bank had given us a break. They sent a letter saying the situation was resolved. I didn't question it." "That letter came from the LLC," I said. "Marcus Coleman drafted it. We wanted you to believe it was the bank so you wouldn't investigate further. So you lied to me. I protected your pride. the same way I've protected it my entire life." He looked up at me then, and I saw something I'd never seen in his eyes before: uncertainty. "You spent $287,000, he said slowly. "For this house." "Yes." "And you never asked for anything back, never told anyone." "No." He shook his head, like a man trying to wake from a dream. Why? It was the question I had asked myself 1,000 times. Why did I save them? Why did I hide it? Why did I keep showing up to family dinners where I was treated like furniture? "Because I loved you," I said. "And I thought love meant sacrificing in silence." The words settled over the room. "But I was wrong," I continued. "Love doesn't mean letting yourself be invisible. Love doesn't mean accepting cruelty as normal. And love definitely doesn't mean handing over your home because your sister wants more space." My father's head dropped. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the one looking away. Jennifer stood frozen in the kitchen doorway, her children huddled behind her, sensing the tension, even if they didn't understand it. "I didn't know about any of this," she said. Her voice had lost all its usual authority. "How was I supposed to know?" "You weren't," I replied. "But you didn't need to know about the foreclosure to treat me decently. You didn't need financial records to stop comparing yourself to me at every opportunity. I never— Thanksgiving 3 years ago. You told everyone I was married to my job because I couldn't find a man. My birthday last year. You forgot, and when I reminded you, you said it wasn't a big deal because I didn't have kids to celebrate with anyway." I paused. Should I keep going? Jennifer's cheeks flushed red. Derek, standing behind his wife, shifted uncomfortably. "Maybe we should all take a breath here. I've been taking breaths for 10 years, I said. Deep breaths, calming breaths, let it go breaths. I'm done breathing through being treated like the family afterthought." Jennifer's eyes filled with tears, actual tears, not the performative kind she used when she wanted something. "I was jealous," she whispered. "You got to leave. You got to build a life. I stayed and I had kids and everything was so hard and Mom and Dad always talked about how successful you were behind your back. And you thought making me feel small would make you feel bigger?" She didn't answer. She didn't have to. "I'm not here to punish you," I said, "but I'm also not here to pretend anymore. You asked me to give you my home. Dad told me to disappear. And I'm done being the person who says yes to everything just to keep the peace." For the first time, my sister had nothing to say. I gathered the documents and returned them to the Navy folder. The dining room was still, 23 people watching, waiting to see what would happen next. The turkey was getting cold. The cranberry sauce was slowly forming a skin. Thanksgiving, interrupted. "I didn't come here to evict anyone," I said, addressing the room. "Mom and Dad can continue living in this house." My father's head snapped up. "But things are going to change." I removed one final document from my bag, a lease agreement I'd asked Marcus to prepare. "This is a new rental contract, $1,200 per month. That's half the market rate for a house this size in Westbrook." I set it on the table. "You have 30 days to decide. Sign the new lease and stay at a fair price, or we can discuss other arrangements." My mother reached for the paper with trembling hands. "I'm not asking for gratitude," I continued. "I'm asking for respect. If you want to have a relationship with me, if you want me at holidays, if you want to know what's happening in my life, then you'll treat me like I matter. Not like the backup daughter, not like the family ATM, like a person." No one spoke. I slung my bag over my shoulder and turned toward the door. "If you want to talk, really talk, like adults, I'll be staying at Evelyn's through the weekend. You know how to reach me." Evelyn rose and walked to my side. At the door, I paused and looked back at my father. He was still sitting in his chair, staring at the lease agreement like it was written in a language he didn't understand. "I love you," I said. "But love isn't the same as accepting abuse. Not anymore." And I walked out into the November cold. Evelyn drove. I couldn't trust my hands not to shake. For the first 15 minutes, neither of us spoke. The Connecticut suburbs scrolled past, bare trees, brown lawns, houses with Thanksgiving decorations still cheerful in their windows. Normal families having normal holidays. I wondered how many of those normal families had secrets like ours. "How do you feel?" Evelyn finally asked. I stared at the dashboard. I thought I'd feel victorious. Like in the movies, when the underdog finally gets their moment, and the music swells and everyone realizes they were wrong. And instead, I feel tired. The word came out heavy. Just really, really tired. Evelyn nodded. That is what setting boundaries feels like at first. It's not euphoria, it's exhaustion. You've been carrying all that weight for so long that putting it down feels like collapsing. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I didn't check it. "Do you regret it?" Evelyn asked. I thought about my father's face when he realized the house wasn't his, my mother's tears, Jennifer's shock, the way the whole room had looked at me like I'd transformed into someone they'd never seen before. "No," I said finally. "I regret that it had to happen this way, but I don't regret telling the truth." We turned onto Evelyn's street. The porch light was on, the way it always was. "What happens now?" I asked. "Now you rest. Tomorrow you'll have decisions to make, calls to return or not return, olive branches to accept or decline." She pulled into the driveway and turned off the engine. "But tonight, you just breathe. You did something incredibly hard. You get to be exhausted." My phone buzzed again. This time I pulled it out and glanced at the screen. One message from Marcus. "How did it go?" One message from Jennifer. "We need to talk." By 9 p.m., my phone had become a battlefield. I sat on Evelyn's guest bed, scrolling through the aftermath. Uncle Tom. "Bianca, I had no idea about any of this. Your father kept everything close to his chest, as always. If you need anything, legal advice, someone to talk to, I'm here." Aunt Martha. "Sweetheart, you were so brave today. I always knew there was more to you than your parents saw. Call me when you're ready." Cousin Sarah. "I'm shook. Literally shook. My mom told me what happened and I can't believe it. You're amazing and I'm so sorry you've been dealing with this alone." Cousin Rachel. "Did you really buy their house? This is insane. Also, I kind of want to buy you a drink." 4 out of 5 relatives who'd contacted me had sided with me, or at least expressed support. The 5th, a distant cousin I barely knew, had sent a vague, "praying for your family during this difficult time," that I decided not to analyze. From my parents? Nothing. Jennifer's message still sat unanswered. "We need to talk." I called Marcus instead. "I saw the documents," he said after I'd given him the summary. "Or rather, I know what's in them. You presented everything?" "Everything except the termination notice." "Good. Keep that as a last resort." He paused. "How are you holding up?" "I don't know yet. Ask me in a week." "Fair enough. If they want to negotiate the lease, have them contact my office. You don't need to handle the legal details yourself." After we hung up, I stared at Jennifer's message for a long time. We need to talk. Maybe we did, but not tonight. Tonight, I was going to sleep in a house where someone actually wanted me there. Friday morning, Black Friday, the day after. Jennifer called at 9 a.m. I let it ring 4 times before answering. "Can we meet?" Her voice was smaller than I'd ever heard it. "Just us. Somewhere neutral." An hour later, we sat across from each other in a coffee shop in downtown Westbrook, the kind of generic chain where no one from our family ever went. Jennifer looked like she hadn't slept. Her makeup was minimal, her hair pulled back in a hasty ponytail. Without her usual polish, she looked more like the sister I remembered from childhood, before the competition, before the comparisons. "I didn't know about the foreclosure," she said immediately. "I swear, Bianca, Dad never told anyone." "I know." "Then why—" She stopped, started again. "Why didn't you ever say anything? All these years you let us treat you like… Like what? She looked down at her untouched latte. Like you didn't matter. The words hung between us. Because I was afraid, I said finally. Afraid that if I stood up for myself, I'd lose the only family I had. Even if that family made me feel invisible. Jennifer's eyes were wet. I was jealous of you. You know that, right? You got out. You built a career. You didn't have 3 kids pulling at you every second. I resented you for having freedom I gave up. And so you punished me for it. Yes. She said it simply, without excuse. I did. We sat in silence for a long moment. I'm sorry, Jennifer said. I know that's not enough, but I'm sorry. I didn't tell her it was okay. It wasn't, not yet. But I didn't walk away either. Sorry is a start, I said. But it's just a start. What happens next is what actually matters. Sunday afternoon, 2 days after Thanksgiving. I was reading in Evelyn's living room when my phone rang. My mother's name on the screen. Bianca. Her voice was raw, like she'd been crying for 2 days straight. Your father wants to talk. Can you come to the phone? A shuffle. Then, Bianca. My father's voice. The man who'd told me to lose his number. Dad? Silence stretched for 10 seconds. I didn't feel it. I didn't know, he finally said. I didn't know it was you. All this time I thought the bank… I know what you thought. Another long pause. I was wrong. The words came out like they were being extracted with pliers. About the foreclosure, about how I treated you, about… He trailed off. About telling me to disappear? I heard him take a breath. Yes, that too. It wasn't quite an apology, but it was the closest my father had ever come to admitting fault in 62 years of living. Your mother and I talked about the new lease. We'll sign it, the $1,200 a month. He paused. If that's still an option. It's an option. And we want to see you when you're ready. If you're ready. I looked at Evelyn, who was watching from the kitchen doorway. She gave me a small nod. I'm not ready yet, I said. But I might be. Eventually. That's fair. His voice cracked slightly. Bianca, I spent my whole life being afraid of looking weak. I didn't know it was making me cruel. I didn't know what I was doing to you. Then maybe, I said quietly, it's time you learned. I hung up before he could respond, but for the first time in my life, the silence didn't feel like defeat. If you've made it this far, I want to ask you, have you ever been the family member who gave everything and got nothing back? The one who showed up, helped out, and was still somehow the villain? Tell me your story in the comments. I read every single one, and I promise, you're not alone. And if you want to know how my family changed after that Thanksgiving, whether my father actually kept his word, whether Jennifer became the sister I'd always wanted, hit subscribe and stay tuned. This story isn't over yet. December 14th, 2024. 2.5 weeks after Thanksgiving. Marcus Coleman's conference room was all glass and chrome, the kind of space that made everything feel official, permanent. My parents sat on one side of the table. Marcus and I sat on the other. The lease agreement lay between us, 3 copies printed on crisp white paper. My father looked older than he had at Thanksgiving. The past few weeks had stripped away some of the bluster, left behind a 62-year-old man who was finally seeing himself clearly. Before we sign, Marcus said, I want to confirm that everyone understands the terms. $1,200 per month, payable on the first of each month. 2-year lease with option to renew. Standard maintenance responsibilities for the tenants. Any questions? My father shook his head. My mother reached across the table and touched my hand. Thank you, she whispered, for not putting us on the street, for giving us another chance. This isn't charity, I said gently. This is a fair arrangement. You'll be paying rent. I'll be the landlord. That's a business relationship. I know, but it's It's also you not giving up on us. After everything. I didn't know what to say to that, so I just nodded. Richard picked up the pen and signed his name on the first lease. Careful, deliberate strokes. Diane signed beside him. Marcus notarized each copy. When it was done, we stood outside the office building, the December wind cutting through our coats. "We'll do better," my father said. It was the closest he'd ever come to a promise. "I don't know how yet, but we'll try." I looked at him, really looked, and saw something I'd never seen before: effort. "Trying is a start," I said, and for the first time, I believed it might be enough. I drove back to New Haven that evening to see Evelyn before returning to Hartford. Her house smelled like cinnamon and wood smoke. The fireplace had been lit, and she'd made tea the way she always did, strong enough to stand a spoon in. "So it's done," she said, settling into her armchair. "The lease is signed. They'll start paying in January." "And how do you feel?" I wrapped my hands around the warm mug. "Lighter, like I've been carrying a suitcase I didn't even know I was holding, and I finally set it down." Evelyn smiled. "You know, I never did the same with Richard. All those years of his condescension, his little comments about Howard's success. I just smiled and let it go." "Why?" "Because I told myself it was easier. Because I convinced myself that keeping the peace was more important than keeping my dignity." She shook her head slowly. "I was wrong. The peace I kept wasn't peace at all. It was just silence." I thought about my own years of silence, the swallowed hurt, the unacknowledged contributions, the constant choosing of family harmony over self-respect. "You did something I never could," Evelyn continued. "You stood in that room and told the truth, even though it would have been easier to stay quiet. That took courage I didn't have at your age." "I learned from you," I said. "You were the one who told me about the foreclosure. You gave me the choice. I gave you information. The courage was yours." We sat together in comfortable silence, the fire crackling softly. "What happens now?" Evelyn asked. "I go back to Hartford. I go back to work. I build a life that's actually mine, not one I've been performing for other people." "That sounds like a good plan." "It sounds like freedom." March 2025, 3 months after Thanksgiving. The promotion came through on a Tuesday afternoon. Senior analyst, effective immediately. Salary, $145,000. Private office with a window. The recognition I'd been working toward for 5 years. I celebrated alone that evening with a glass of wine and a quiet sense of satisfaction. No need to call home and wait for approval that would never come. No need to wonder if they'd find a way to diminish it. The achievement was mine, and that was enough. Other changes had accumulated, smaller, but no less significant. My 5th investment property closed in February, a duplex in Hartford's West End that I'd been watching for 18 months. The portfolio I'd built in secret was becoming harder to hide, not that I was trying anymore. My parents paid their rent on time, January 1st, February 1st, March 1st, $1,200, deposited directly into Hartwell Properties LLC's business account. I never mentioned it when we spoke, and neither did they. It was simply understood, a new arrangement, a new kind of family. Jennifer texted me every week, small things mostly, photos of the kids, updates about her day, questions about my work that she actually listened to the answers for. We weren't close, not yet, but we were present. Derek called once, unexpectedly, just to thank me. "You gave us a chance to be better," he said. I know it didn't feel like a gift at the time, but it was. I'd spent so long measuring my life against my family's expectations that I'd forgotten what it felt like to measure it against my own. Now, for the first time, I was ahead, and the only person whose approval mattered was the one looking back at me in the mirror. April 2025. My 35th birthday. I made a decision. I would go back to Connecticut, but on my own terms. No gathering at my parents' house. No pretending things were normal when they weren't. Instead, I booked a private room at a restaurant in Westbrook, neutral ground, and invited only the people who'd actually shown up for me. The guest list was small. Evelyn, of course, Uncle Tom and Aunt Patricia, Cousin Sarah, who'd become an unexpected ally. And yes, my parents and Jennifer and Derek. The children stayed home with a babysitter. It was the strangest birthday dinner I'd ever had. We sat around a table set for 10, eating salmon and risotto while navigating the new geography of our family. My father spoke less than usual. When he did speak, he asked questions about my work instead of offering opinions. It was awkward, clearly rehearsed, but it was effort. Real effort. Jennifer brought a gift, a photo album she'd assembled herself, filled with pictures from our childhood, images I'd never seen before. The two of us building sandcastles, sharing a popsicle, sleeping curled together on a couch. "I found these in Mom's attic," she said. "I thought you should have them." I turned the pages slowly, seeing a version of us that existed before the competition began. "Thank you," I said. And I meant it. At the end of the evening, my mother hugged me at the door. "I'm sorry," she whispered into my shoulder. "I'm sorry I didn't protect you." It was the first time she'd ever apologized directly. I didn't say it's okay. It wasn't, not completely. But I hugged her back. "We're trying," I said. "That's what matters now." And for the first time, it actually felt true. Summer 2025, 6 months after Thanksgiving. I sat in my Hartford condo, the one my family had once dismissed as a tiny rental, looking out at the city lights and thinking about everything that had changed. 6 months ago, I would have done anything for my family's approval. I would have swapped homes with Jennifer. I would have continued paying $500 a month to a family fund that never thanked me. I would have kept saving a house from foreclosure while pretending it wasn't mine, just so my father could keep his pride. I would have stayed invisible forever, if that's what it took to belong. Now, I understood something I wished I'd learned years earlier. Belonging shouldn't cost you yourself. The deed to 847 Maple Grove Lane still sat in my safe, along with all the other documents Marcus had helped me organize. I didn't keep it as a weapon or a reminder of what I'd sacrificed. I kept it as proof. Proof that I was capable of more than anyone had ever given me credit for. Proof that I existed, even when no one was looking. My phone buzzed. "Evelyn. Lunch Saturday? I found a new restaurant in New Haven you'd love." I smiled and typed back, "Wouldn't miss it." Family, I'd learned, wasn't about blood or obligation. It was about the people who showed up when you needed them, who stood beside you when you finally decided to stand up for yourself. Evelyn had been that person. Marcus, in his way, had been that person. And slowly, tentatively, my parents and Jennifer were learning to become those people too. It wasn't the family I'd grown up with. It was the family I was building. And for the first time in my life, I got to choose. Christmas 2025. 1 year after everything changed. I drove to Connecticut on Christmas Eve, but not to Maple Grove Lane. Instead, I parked in front of Evelyn's Cape Cod in New Haven, where the porch light was already glowing and the windows were fogged with warmth. The guest list was small this year, by my choice. Evelyn, Cousin Sarah and her husband, Uncle Tom and Aunt Patricia. A few close friends from Hartford who'd become my chosen family over the past 12 months. My parents weren't there. Jennifer wasn't there. We weren't estranged. Not exactly. They'd been invited to Evelyn's for Christmas Eve, and they'd declined, preferring to spend the holiday at their own house. It was progress in a way. They'd stopped expecting me to always come to them. But I sent gifts anyway. A cashmere scarf for my mother, a bottle of my father's favorite bourbon, a spa certificate for Jennifer because she deserved something for herself. And I sent a card too. My handwriting on ivory paper. "Merry Christmas. Love, Bianca. No conditions, no expectations, just an open door." My father texted back that evening while I was laughing at something Evelyn had said over dinner. "Thank you, sweetheart. Merry Christmas. I love you." I stared at those words for a long moment. 5 words that would have meant everything to me a year ago, that I would have done anything to hear. Now, They were just words. Nice to receive, not necessary to survive. I set down my phone and rejoined the conversation, surrounded by people who'd earned their place in my life. The snow was falling outside, the fire was warm, and for the first time in 35 years, I was exactly where I belonged. Not because I'd earned it through sacrifice, because I'd finally learned to choose myself. Thank you for staying with me until the end. If you've ever felt overlooked by your family, if you've been the one who gives everything and gets nothing back, I want you to know, you deserve better. Setting boundaries isn't selfish, telling the truth isn't cruel, and choosing yourself isn't abandonment. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe. It helps more than you know. And if you're ready for another story about standing up for yourself, check out the video linked in the description below. I think you'll find it speaks to you too. I'm Bianca Hartwell. Thank you for listening, and remember, you don't have to set yourself on fire to keep someone else warm.